Okay, here we're going to be diving into the middle of your fantasy football drafts, the meat and potatoes, rounds 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, trying to identify the best wide receiver values in this range. Hell, this is where you had someone like Cooper Kupp last year, and we know that Cooper Kupp had over a 30% win rate, which meant if you drafted Cooper Kupp, particularly in a best ball draft, hell, you had a 30% chance of winning your league, up from about an 8% chance if you're playing in that 12-team contest, which is absolutely ridiculous. But here, before we dive into it, please make sure you go down there, subscribe to the channel. I'm sure a lot of people here have missed our early round wide receiver value video. And if you were subscribed, if you had the bell hit next to the subscribe button, hell, you wouldn't have missed that. And on top of it, go down there, drop that like, leave a comment letting me know your favorite mid-round wide receivers so I can go down there and I can tell you exactly why you're wrong. But that should be it. Let's go ahead. Let's dive into a wide receiver that has seen his value fall this offseason, that is not going to participate at training camp, that is not going to participate in the preseason, that is going to miss the beginning portion of the season as well. Let's talk about Chris Godwin. Now, with Chris Godwin, I understand you can easily make an argument that his value may continue to fall. If you head over to Underdog Fantasy right now and check, this is a wide receiver that's being drafted as the wide receiver 28, a mid wide receiver 3. He's going at the very end of the 5th round, the beginning of the 6th round. He's going right in between Juju Smith-Schuster and Darnell Mooney. And if I'm looking at Chris Godwin, I am personally looking at a wide receiver from a points per game standpoint that we know is going to be a top 12 option this upcoming season. We go through, and if you look at his past 3 years, the 26-year-old wide receiver has averaged a top 10 finish over the past 3 seasons in Tampa. And I would make the argument that this is going to be his best situation that Chris Godwin's ever seen. Because now you have Tom Brady in this offense. Of course, Tom Brady, a much better quarterback than Jameis Winston. And on top of it, you are getting the departure of both Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski. And if you look at Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski leaving this offense, this past season, those two players combined for 151 targets, 1,300 receiving yards, and 10 receiving touchdowns at the same time. So if we are looking at that stat line and you try to distribute it to wide receivers in this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, well, it's unlikely all going to go to Russell Gage. If you think that's all going to Russell Gage, hell, I got news for you. You need to go through and you need to draft Russell Gage in the 2nd round of your fantasy draft. But of course, you're not a crazy person. You don't think that Russell Gage is going to walk away with over 1,300 receiving yards this upcoming season. Now, he should get a lot of that. We really liked Russell Gage whenever he first signed in Tampa and you were getting him at a discount. Now, people are kind of on to him. Now, if you're breaking that down, say, give 800, 900 receiving yards to Russell Gage, bump up Mike Evans by 100 yards or so. I think that you can't bump up Mike Evans too much more than that, considering Mike Evans is going into his 9th NFL season. You still have a couple hundred receiving yards to go around. I'm not a massive believer in Cameron Brate stepping up and getting that volume. I am expecting that Chris Godwin should see more targets per game. He had a target share of 21% in games that he played in last year. He had almost 80 receiving yards a game at the same time. I would not be surprised if this target share gets bumped back up to what you had in 2019, where you had closer to a 22, 23% team target share. And on top of that, if you're looking at the efficiency in this passing offense with Tom Brady, that would lead to Chris Godwin averaging yet again 90, 95 receiving yards per game. And that would unlock top 5 overall upside for Chris Godwin, which isn't crazy to say because we saw him as the wide receiver 2 overall, only behind Michael Thomas, a wide receiver we'll talk about a little bit later on, in 2019. And here now you are looking at an offense that is going to throw the ball over and over and over again. Y'all know usually I head over to RotoViz and to look at overall pace of play as well as pass to run ratio. We set it to game neutral environments, but I want to look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a different light because I've been talking about this for quite a while now. If you just turn on a Tampa Bay Buccaneers game, I lived in Tampa this past season, and you just watch the game through, this team will be up by multiple touchdowns. It will be 1st and 5. It will be 2nd and 2. It will be 1st and goal, and they're up 35-0, and they are throwing the ball nonstop. They are throwing the ball over and over and over again. So I went over to RotoViz and I filtered out teams that were winning. Okay, you only had to be up by 1 point, and we looked at pass rate over expectation in that environment. The pass to run ratio of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when they were leading the game was 61%. That was number 1 in the NFL this past season. They're also pushing the pace of play, only 25 seconds per snap. So we can see that Tom Brady, we can see this entire team is trying to pad Tom Brady's stat line, that it doesn't matter if this team is up. They are going to continue to try to allow Tom Brady to be a top 3 passer in the NFL this upcoming season. So I think when Godwin is on the field, he is going to be a mega producer, as we've seen over the past 3 years, and as the situation is now better than what it once was. Now, yes, the man tore up his knee. Okay, it was devastating. Happened on December 19th as well, which is not good at all. What's even worse, and what I don't understand at all, is he waited until January 4th to have surgery. Now, if we just get out our fingers and go 1, 2, 3, 4, count up to 9, and we try to figure out when he's coming back, a 9-month timetable for Chris Godwin, which that's typically, I know if you look up online, it says 6 to 9 months. No, it's going to be 9 months for the timetable for a torn ACL. That is going to have him coming back week 5. So if you're playing in a traditional format where you have to submit your starting lineup every single week, where you can make trades throughout the season, maybe Chris Godwin's not your guy, because maybe you can trade for Chris Godwin week 4, week 5 at the same price it would have costed you to draft him, and you could have that extra roster spot at the beginning of the season, and you could also try to go through and grab a different wide receiver in this range to sell high and make that profit at the beginning of the year. However, if you're playing in a best ball league where you can't make trades during the season, if you're playing on Underdog Fantasy or something like Best Ball Mania, y'all know on Underdog Fantasy and Best Ball Mania, they have the $25 buy-in league where first place gets paid, second place gets paid in your 12-team league, but a small percentage of every league pot is set aside for that playoff tournament at the very end of the season. We have weeks 15, 16, and 17 for those league winners and the people who got second in their 12-team league. If you're advancing into that large 12-team tournament, give me all the Chris Godwin I can get, because he could be the wide receiver 1 overall during that stretch. And he'll probably be at low ownership because he won't be putting up points at the beginning portion of the season. So his production's going to be backloaded. That's exactly what I'm looking for in that format. So maybe if you're drafting in your traditional fantasy football format, you pass on Chris Godwin there and try to trade for him as a buy low candidate during this season. But if I'm drafting in a best ball league, I'm going to take the discount. I'm going to draft Chris Godwin as a wide receiver 3, get the elite production at the end of the season when we need it. And real quick, if you are not drafting on Underdog Fantasy, fix your life. Go down there, go to the comment section, go to the link in the description, go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use promo code FLOCK when you sign up for Underdog Fantasy, and they'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Not only are they going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100, you'll get our 2022 rankings, our dynasty rankings, our dynasty rookie rankings. You'll be able to get into drafts with us on the live stream, and most importantly, you will have fun, which is what matters. Find the link in the description. Now, our next wide receiver wasn't someone that I was really buying into at the beginning of this draft process, but now, hell, I'm taking the discount. I'm ignoring what y'all are saying. I'm drafting Treylon Burks now that his price has come down. Very similar to Jamar Chase last offseason. I had the embarrassing take that I thought Jamar Chase was initially overvalued in these drafts when he was a player going in the 4th round as a rookie wide receiver. I acknowledged the fact that Jamar Chase was an elite level prospect, but I looked at T. Higgins, looked at Tyler Boyd. I thought they were great options and said, you know what? Yeah, Chase, I don't necessarily think he's a good value here in the 4th round. I'm going to be avoiding. But then what happened? You had people overreacting to training camp blurbs, overreacting to the preseason that Jamar Chase can't catch the ball, yada, yada, yada. And then his price finally fell behind T. Higgins. His price fell from being a 4th round selection to a 6th round selection. And thank God, I saved myself some money. I wasn't too much of an idiot that I was able to draft some Jamar Chase last year. I'm getting similar vibes here with Treylon Burks, because this is a wide receiver that the fall is unjust, in my opinion. Now, you're looking at reports coming out of Tennessee saying he's the wide receiver 3. That's not true. That is not going to be true for Treylon Burks. I know that people are also concerned about his asthma. Okay, now, I don't have asthma. I don't know what it's like being someone with asthma, but what I can do is I can take a step back. I can, instead of hyper-focusing in on Treylon Burks missing a few practices, missing some meaningless reps before the season starts due to his asthma, I can look at Treylon Burks, who dealt with asthma in college, playing 11 games as a true freshman, playing 9 games as a true sophomore, playing 12 games this final season, and his team leaning on him play in and play out. Treylon Burks averaged almost 46% of his team's receiving yards on a per game basis. That is elite. I mean, that's something you need to see from guys like Jalen Tolbert at South Alabama that play with no target competition at a very small school. But to see that at Arkansas, to see that in the SEC is almost unheard of. And he declares early for the draft. He broke out as a sophomore. He goes to a team where the only receiver that was there last year was Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. That's the incumbent wide receiver that he's going to be competing for. Now, I understand, yes, Robert Woods is good. Robert Woods is there. I think that they are going to be complementary to each other. If you look at Treylon Burks and Robert Woods, they look nothing alike. I mean, you are going to have one of these wide receivers on the outside. The other is going to be the flanker underneath. I think they're going to complement each other in this offense that is going to be a rush first team. And if we look at Treylon Burks, this is a wide receiver that, very similar to Brandon Aiyuk, is now going as a mid wide receiver 4 in these fantasy drafts in an offense that has volume available. And if we go to our wide receiver prospect model, this is over there in our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide, you see that we have Treylon Burks comp to some very good wide receivers. He's comped to Brandon Cooks, A.J. Brown. Now, someone with the same score as him is another mega producer in the SEC that had an early breakout age that also declared early for the draft in Bryan Edwards. But hell yeah, I mean, we know that there are going to be some bust at rookie wide receiver. And then other guys in this range, Mike Evans, CeeDee Lamb, Christian Kirk, Odell Beckham Jr., some other busts like Corey Coleman, Jalen Reagor. I'm not saying Treylon Burks is a guaranteed stud, but what I am saying is, hell, if the price point's a wide receiver 4, because people are worried about his asthma that he was able to dominate the SEC with, hell, I'm going to take advantage of this discount. I'm going to go ahead and get him. Now let's go over to our next wide receiver in Michael Thomas. So earlier in the video, we talked about Chris Godwin, the wide receiver 2 in 2019. Here we are going to go to that wide receiver 1. And with Michael Thomas, I need to acknowledge something. Yes, he is a much riskier draft pick than other players in the same range. If we are looking at where Michael Thomas is currently being drafted, he's being drafted as the wide receiver 36, directly behind Drake London, Adam Thielen, Devonta Smith, Elijah Moore, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I would say all those wide receivers have a higher floor than Michael Thomas does. He's being drafted right before DeAndre Hopkins, Russell Gage, and Hunter Renfrow. But I am personally not going to go through and draft players for their floor. We already mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but speaking on what actually wins fantasy football leagues, it's not that you hit on your first round pick, you hit on your second round pick, you hit on your third round pick, you hit on your fourth. No, what wins fantasy football drafts are a few key players every single season that drive all leagues. If we go back and look at 2021 and we look at Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, and Mark Andrews, and we look at their expected win rate. Cooper Kupp had a 32.9% win rate. That means in 12-team leagues, if you drafted Cooper Kupp, you went from expecting to win your league about 8% of the time to 33%. Deebo Samuel was at 20%. Mark Andrews was at 19%. Okay, so I really, really want to hammer this home that one pick can win you your entire fantasy football league. And with Michael Thomas, we've seen access to that ceiling before. We saw him in 2019, the last year that you had a healthy Michael Thomas. He goes out, he averages 107 receiving yards per game. He averages 11 and a half targets a game, a 32% team target share, and three yards per route run. That is absurd. That is obnoxious. And now I understand, yes, you are looking at Jameis Winston taking over for Drew Brees. And with Jameis Winston, compared to Drew Brees, he is laughably worse, where, of course, you are going to go out of your way and take Drew Brees if you're an NFL general manager 10 times out of 10. Now, I will say that it's going to be a little bit of a different story in fantasy football in particular, Because what makes Jameis Winston a bad NFL quarterback? Is it the lack of overall passing volume, or is it the lack of care with the football? It's going to be the lack of care with the football. This is a quarterback that last time we saw him start an entire season was back in 2019, the same year that Michael Thomas was elite. And back then, Jameis Winston had 30 interceptions, which caused his team to skew from an offense that wanted to be a little bit more run heavy to have to throw the ball 626 times to catch up on those teams that had that pick six off of them. This led Jameis Winston to be number 1 in the NFL in passing yards. This led Jameis Winston to be number 2 in the NFL in passing touchdowns at the same time. So we know that you have the passing volume there in New Orleans, potentially for Michael Thomas. We've seen Michael Thomas be that elite level wide receiver before. And yes, Michael Thomas is not at training camp, but if we go through and just look at Michael Thomas on social media, looks like Michael Thomas is training. It looks like Michael Thomas is out there actually, I don't want to say healthy, but making steps in the right direction. And if he's finally out there working out and it's June, I think by the time we get to September, this is a wide receiver that may finally be healthy. And yes, you are taking a risk when you select Michael Thomas here, but I'm swinging for the fences. In fantasy football, I'm never trying to hit a single, because if you're trying to hit a single, hell, maybe you don't embarrass yourself, but at the same time, you're not winning your league. Now, our next wide receiver is going to be someone from the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I don't know if I am just going ahead and buying too much into this Pittsburgh Steelers passing offense, but we're going to be looking at Chase Claypool here. Now, with Chase Claypool, very similar to Deontay Johnson, who we just got done talking about. I think people are overreacting to the change at quarterback. Let me remind everyone, Ben Roethlisberger was bad last year. He was very bad. Maybe you're pushing down Chase Claypool because you think that George Pickens is going to be something, because you see them also draft Calvin Austin, because you see them take 2 rookie wide receivers this year. But may I remind you that this team lost all its wide receiver depth. This team had Juju Smith-Schuster going over to Kansas City, which you know, I know, everybody knows. But this team also had James Washington going over to Dallas. This team had Ray McCloud going over to San Francisco. That was almost 1,000 routes run in this Pittsburgh Steelers offense leaving. They had to address the depth. They had to take George Pickens. They had to take Calvin Austin. Austin's literally just a field stretcher. I mean, he's almost not even a wide receiver. He's just going to be out there as a decoy. So George Pickens is really the only added in target competition. And we're unsure if George Pickens is better than Juju, freaking James Washington, Ray McCloud. We don't know that yet. And if we go ahead and you look at Chase Claypool, this is a wide receiver that may actually fit better with someone like Kenny Pickett, fit better with someone like Mitchell Trubisky. Because if we look at the average depth of target for wide receivers in this offense, you had Chase Claypool with an average depth of target of 11.45 compared to Deontay Johnson at 8.5. So maybe, just maybe, you can spin it and say, okay, well, yeah, the reason that Deontay Johnson was a target hog was simply because Ben Roethlisberger couldn't push the ball down the field. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. I want to be on record saying I still love Deontay Johnson. He's my go-to guy in this offense. But maybe you try to make the argument that with an improved arm, don't want to say intelligence, yada, yada. No, just with more arm strength coming into this offense, all of a sudden, they can look to push the ball down the field to Chase Claypool. But the most telling sign for Claypool and why I'm going to take this discount on him is I think people are discounting him for the wrong reason. I think people are looking at the drop in points per game that was primarily due to his touchdowns per game in this offense, falling from 0.7 to 0.1. His touchdown rate falling from 11% down to less than 2% in this offense. That's a laughable drop in touchdown rate, which is the most volatile statistic in fantasy football. I think we can expect this to go back up to 7-8% in Pittsburgh, which will be exciting. And if we go ahead and look at his target share improved by almost 2% this past year. His receiving yards per game improved. His targets per game improved. Those are the marks we are looking for. So yes, his overall fantasy points per game took a tip down. Everything else I'm looking at, I'm just fine with. So I'll take Chase Claypool when he's going as a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 in these drafts. Now let's go over to our last wide receiver, someone that had a night and day difference from the beginning portion of his season to the end of the year. Let's go over to Brandon Aiyuk. Now with Brandon Aiyuk, yes, he was in the straight up doghouse at the beginning of the season. This is a wide receiver that wasn't even running a route on 60% of snaps. which was crazy to see because if we remember Brandon Aiyuk, his rookie season, he was fantastic. If we look at players since 2010 that averaged 8 targets a game and a 20% team target share, these were the wide receivers that were able to do that as a rookie. Odell Beckham Jr., Mike Evans, Amari Cooper, Jalen Waddle, Kevin Benjamin, Brandon Aiyuk, Sammy Watkins, Mike Williams, Justin Blackmon. Those are impressive wide receivers that Brandon Aiyuk was able to put himself on the map and justify his first-round NFL draft capital that the San Francisco 49ers decided to give him in 2020. So when he was in the doghouse at the start of the season, yes, you needed to be concerned. But halfway through the year, for whatever reason, Kyle Shanahan took him out of timeout and said, you know what, man? Yeah, you are probably our best perimeter receiver. We probably need to get you on the field. And after that happened, Aiyuk turned back into an every down player. You're looking at Aiyuk just say through the first 5 weeks of the season, these were his receiving yards numbers, or call it through the first 6 weeks. 6, 37, 15, 32, 6, 45. And then you just look at that full-blown emergency in the second half. 89, 26, 85, 91, 55, 62, 36, 40, 94, 107. It was a night and day difference in his statistics and his overall role at the same time. And with Aiyuk, this is a wide receiver that you actually are getting a discount on. With Brandon Aiyuk right now, he's going as the wide receiver 41, so a mid wide receiver 4 for your fantasy drafts. And you're able to actually take him on the turn, pair him up with Trey Lance, one of my favorite quarterbacks. Maybe that's why I'm drafting so much Brandon Aiyuk, because I love going with Brandon Aiyuk and then directly after grabbing our guy, Trey Lance. Now, I will admit, based on the presence of both Deebo Samuel and George Kittle, Aiyuk may not necessarily be able to justify his ADP if both of those players stay healthy through the entire season. Now, this is mainly due to Trey Lance. While I love the man, I'm expecting that this team is number 1 in the NFL with their overall rush to pass ratio with Lance at quarterback, and I'm unsure that he's going to be able to support 3 top options in the receiving game. Now, with that being said, if both Deebo as well as George Kittle stay healthy, I'm viewing Brandon Aiyuk as a player that, yeah, probably going to be a wide receiver 4 in fantasy. You're probably just going to hit a single when you draft him, and that's not necessarily what we look for. But at the same time, if we go through and you look at the Deebo Samuel and George Kittle injury history, it's absurd. You have a significant chance that one of those 2 players miss time this upcoming season. And if we look at Brandon Aiyuk without, say, George Kittle in this offense, Brandon Aiyuk goes from a player getting about 5.5 targets a game to about 8.5 targets a game. If we look at Brandon Aiyuk in games where Deebo Samuel missed over the past 2 years, he goes from seeing about 6 targets a game to about 8 targets a game. So I think Aiyuk is being drafted close to his floor. And hell, if there was an injury to Kittle or Deebo, then you could see him elevate and really crush his ADP. Now, thank you for being a part of the flock. Really hope you enjoyed the video. If you have not done so already, go down there, drop that like, subscribe to the channel to become a part of the flock. And yeah, that's all I got for you. Really appreciate you. I really hope you have a great day, and I really hope we get to see you with the live stream tonight.